everyone, and thank you very much for joining us for another installment of Stories from the Railway. And today we're pleased, or actually very excited, maybe because we're girls, but we've got lots of them here too, that we're going to be focusing on love today. And it's a little bit of a softer side of the railway. I know some of you have joined us for some previous stories from the railway and have heard stories of railroading from the 50s through the 80s. As well as architecture of the railway, and we're just really pleased to be able to bring stories of the people and sort of the love of the railway. And we at the museum, to coin the term of our former president, really like to focus on the human element of the railway because it's really everyone's stories that make history. So thank you very much for joining us. Just a few quick things here. Washrooms, I'm sure most of you know where they are now, but if not, you can head through the double doors and they're just past the elevator on the left-hand side. We're also videotaping today, and thank you very much to the Workers' Heritage Museum and Barry for coming out and doing that for us. But not to worry, just pretty much your heads will be part of that. After our first speaker, we'll invite everyone to come back up to the main lobby, and we'll have some light refreshments, some coffee, tea, and some cookies, little snacks. So please help yourself. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Maureen Halpenny, who was born and raised in Smiths Falls. She's the daughter of a former railway CPR railway engineer, Harold Halpenny, and Maureen I first met when we started doing the history project and collecting oral histories, and we just haven't let her go yet. So, without further ado, Maureen Halpenny.
Good afternoon. I hope I don't bore you too much because it's been going through family memories and the theme falling in love with the railway. I'm honored to speak because during the last couple of months I reconnected with my parents and my siblings, and we're sharing stories. Oh, do you remember the time that? And how was that? So I hope I don't ramble too much. But I want to say before I even start, as a way of disclaimer, these are my memories and my experiences. Other children who were raised on the railroad, as we like to say, might have different recollections and different memories, although we do share some commonality. This is my truth. When I would be visiting over at Willowdale, oftentimes I would run into railroaders, that's where my parents are now, and children of railroaders. And I was talking to one, Lynn Muskelly, her dad, Red, used to work with my dad on the railroad, and I told her what I was doing, and she said, oh, for sure. She said, railroaders' brats, yeah. I said, yeah. And she said, guess what I got for Christmas? And I said, what? She said, I got a skill saw for Christmas. But I understood, because being a railroad kid, your parents taught you to do everything. You knew how to do basic carpentry, wiring, plumbing, male or female, it didn't matter, because you had to be self-reliant and responsible. I'll talk about that a little bit later. But one thing I wanted to start with, I suppose to be a railroader, I should have the railroader's cap. 90% of the time I saw my dad, he had this hat on. And then, of course, there was the railroader kerchief. I don't know whether it has another name, but I just called it a railroader's kerchief. So we get into the jargon even as kids before we start. The railroader's hat, railroader's kerchief. Then we had railroader's flashlight, heavy-duty little thing with CPR right on it, and Dad would bring it home and say, don't get caught with that. That's CPR. The railroader lunch pail that was still in the basement. I'll be talking about that a little bit more later. How many of you in this room either were a railroader or related to railroaders? Yep, that's Smiths Falls. Here we are. So you've probably heard this expression, railroader's turkey. Anybody know what railroader's turkey is? Bologna. Bologna. What are we having for lunch? Railroader's turkey. Oh, just stringy old bologna. Railroader's potatoes. Now they call them hash browns or refried potatoes, but it was railroaders' thing. And I thought that military time was a long time before I grew up and knew that military time, 0800, was military time. I thought it was railroaders' time. Because you had to know what that was too. To start off, when we talk about love in the railroad, there were many kinds of love. This picture was done for my dad on his retirement by another railroader. This is probably one of his prized possessions. It was done by Owen Pepper, railroader in town. It represents the train, the Royal Hudson, actually this is, because Dad started on the steam train, then the diesel that he went on. This represents my dad, and they all had nicknames, so this would be Hal. But the bond that was between railroader brothers was probably where it all started. Even before they were married, they were like family. So Dad was on the railroad from 46 to 81. And Owen gave him this at the retirement party. And it is, as I said, one of his prized possessions. So that was one kind of love amongst the men who took care of themselves and each other, sharing things. That extended to their families. The wives would know each other. The kids would know each other. We'd hang out together. So that's the first kind of love. First slide. Doing this research, I discovered that I'm probably 4 or 5 generations railroader. These were the people that raised my mom. They were an aunt at the top, Carrie Hutchison, Rob Hutchison at the bottom. Shortly after my mom was born, her mother died, and then her aunt, Carrie, and Bob, Daddy Bob she always called him, raised her. Carrie's father, Albert Johnston, he apparently worked on the CPR going out west. That would be at the turn of the century. Daddy Bob at the bottom, he joined the railroad in 1917. They were married in 1920, and through the years, the connections were, okay, Daddy Bob was a railroader. Hutchie was her nickname. Her first grandchild couldn't say Hutchison, so nicknamed her Hutchie, and everybody on the planet called her that since then. So when I refer to Hutchie, I'm talking about the woman at the top. Her father, her brother-in-law, she had 2 nephews, her son-in-law, a great-grandson and a grandson, all worked on the railroad that I know of. So it started off with a lovely marriage and growing a family, and then tragedy. Daddy Bob was killed. My mom was 9. Her adopted brother and sister, well, the girl was 19, the son was about 15, so he was still in high school. My mom was about 9 and 10. And this changed everything. For this death, she received a pension of $40 a month. And in 1940, $40 a month didn't go very far. When I was checking with my mom this morning to see whether it was $40 a year or $40 a month, she said a month, but she said she had to have special shoes and they cost $40. So there went. So what do when the love of your life is taken from you on the railroad and you are left to support, well, 2 still living at home, 2 kids? What do? Well, you have to work. My grandmother, Hutchie, this is the silk mill, which is on Victoria Street, across from the old railway station. This was in the 1940s. There she is there, Hutchie. And she worked in the silk mill. And they made, well, I think during the war they made parachutes, but they also made underwear and things like that. And my mother said when she was a youngster, she got a job in the silk mill too, working on weekends and after school, sewing buttons on bloomers. because there were no zippers or anything then. But that would hardly be enough to support a growing family. So, my grandmother, living on 17 Smiths Falls Avenue in Smiths Falls, she took in 13 boarders. Wow. 12 of which were railroaders. And so, for $5 to $10 a week, she would provide room, board, 3 full meals a day, and pack a pail when necessary. So that was one start. It became sort of a superstition that railroaders would not take a call or be ordered from that house, because besides my grandfather who was killed being ordered from that house, 4 others over time were killed on the railroad going out of that house. But that still wasn't enough money. My grandmother, every Saturday, would get up at 3 a.m. and make donuts. By hand, of course, working over a coal oil stove. Hey, I said it without stumbling. 1 pot with old grease. You could only cook about 2 or 3 at a time. So on a weekend, she'd make 50 dozen donuts and sell them within the town. She'd take orders for them. And my mom would deliver them for 1 cent a dozen on her bicycle. So it was a family project. Later on, my grandmother became a switchboard operator at Bell Canada in Smiths Falls on William Street. Now, some of you will remember the old phone. No dial-up, right? You would lift this, and my grandmother would come on the phone and say, "Number, please." And then you would tell the phone number that you wanted, and she'd connect you with a big cord, plug it into the switchboard. And a lot of her calls, of course, would be coming from the CPR office of men being ordered. And they used to ask my grandmother, who had an understanding of the railroad, whatever you do, don't disconnect. Keep that phone ringing until I answer. Because if the man missed the call, that was pretty bad then. It would affect your pay and your income. So she would be to the point where she'd let it ring forever, and then if the person still didn't answer, she would oftentimes phone the number of a call boy or a call girl who would go to the house and wake the person up so that they didn't miss a call. So that was back in the day where privacy really didn't exist on the phone, but in Smiths Falls everybody knew everybody, so it's no big deal anyway. She moved later to Kent Street in Smiths Falls. Some of you will remember it as Crates Row, Main Street, whatever, over in that section by the railroad. Next. My parents were married in 1950. My dad had been in the war, and when he came back from the war, he was looking for a job. He tried to get on at the mines, but that didn't work out too well. So he got on the railroad in, I believe, 1946. So this is my dad, my mom, and then aunts and uncles on the end. He worked his way up, starting in the freight shed, unloading boxcars, and then he became a fireman, shoveling the coal in the old steam locomotives. And at that time, a lot of people don't realize that to make this move from unloading boxcars to firing an engine, you had to write exams. There were books that you had to study, of rules that you had to follow, and you were monitored very closely. But anyway, when they got married, or before they got married, in comes the whistle. The train whistle is very important in our family tradition. I guess Dad, when he was working on the road, doing in the yard, that would be the local trains moving boxcars and that, the engineer was a Mr. Catchpole, and he would say to my dad, "Oh, there goes that girl again," because she'd be walking by the yard. So my mother, "You better blow the whistle." So Dad would blow the whistle at Mom, and of course she would just walk and not notice. But the whistle became very important in our family because Dad, being away from home so often, as all railroaders are, he would say to us kids, "Now when you hear the whistle, I'm saying hi. So even to this day, when I hear a whistle, I feel good about a train whistle. He boarded at another railroader's place before Mom and he were married. And then in 1951, he was what they call set up as an engineer. So he started working with a little bit more money, driving the train, rather than just shoveling the coal. Shoveling the coal, when I was talking to the kids, I realized a lot of them haven't even seen coal. It was coal. And my dad, one way to Montreal, shoveled 8 tons. 8 tons. I thought, when I heard that, I thought, how come he wasn't muscular like Arnold Schwarzenegger? Skinny, lean guy, but 8 tons of coal. One way. Next one. To make this beast go. Now, when you're doing that, you got a big responsibility. You see this smoke coming out of there? It better be the right color. Because the women that lived near the railroad that did their laundry, if that was black smoke coming out of there, the laundry had to come off the line. And we're not talking automatic washers, we're talking old ringer washers. And they had to do it all again. And then you can bet they'd be on the phone to the yard office saying, who's that fool that's dirtying all my laundry? So the smoke had to be white color. And you can see it's a big, forceful machine.
Control the air.
That's right. So they weren't really worried too much about the environment. They were worried about the housewives.
Smart man.
Okay, next. This was my family living on Kent Street. Typical 50s family. I was born in 51. Uh-oh, it said how old I was. So that's me in the center. Then my brother, he was about 3 or 4, and then my sister, about 3, and then the youngest, about 1. So this is a typical railroader family. They had big families back then. And having 4 kids, even though I have heard that railroaders made good money, I always thought we were poor because we had to fight to make ends meet. Nothing was taken for granted. You're not talking being into organized sports and paying the fees for that. No. You would skate if you had an aunt or an uncle who would donate you skates or give you skates. And what you got to eat was, well, my mother was a genius. I don't know how she did it. What a team they made, Mom and Dad. So that was us in the beginning. Next one. And these are pictures from Kent Street. So we were at number 4. My grandmother was down here, which was kind of neat to have her so close. And she even had boarders, I can remember, when I was in public school. She was still doing it to survive. So you can see my dad, my 2 sisters, the dog Bingo. The railroad came into everything. Dad always promised us a dog, and he brought Bingo in 1960 back from Montreal in his pocket. So we were always anxious to see Dad come back on the road. You never knew what he was going to have, but that's where Bingo came from. And the name Bingo, because Mom made the money at the bingo. The wives didn't have a lot of activities. As you can imagine, taking care of 4 kids, you didn't get out much. But bingo was one thing that she did. So that supplemented the income. I remember we got the dog from the bingo games. And then I remember twin beds. Mother won another time at the bingo, a jackpot, so we got twin beds. So this was Kent Street. On Kent Street. How many of you know where that is? Okay. Within that radius, when I was growing up, I counted, there were 27 railroader families. Just on that street and the street behind and across the way. So one of the things you had to do as a child, you better not make noise when railroaders are sleeping. With 27 of them living on the street, what chance did you have? You had to play quietly regardless what it was, what you were doing. And whichever end of the street you would play on depended depended on who was on call, who'd book rest, who was sleeping. Mom said even years later that one of the best compliments she ever got was from the man that lived next door, Cap Fagan, when we were there, who said, "You really have good kids. They know enough to be quiet when railroaders are sleeping." And Mother thought that was amazing. But with 27 in the area, it was like a big family in many ways. The husbands knew and understood what was going on. The wives knew and understood, and the kids as well. So we would help each other. That was good sometimes and bad sometimes. There was what I refer to as a jungle telegraph. You did anything wrong, they knew who you were and they knew where you lived. I remember one time I was 6 years old, I'd gotten a bicycle and I wasn't supposed to ride it across town. Before I got home, my mother knew. And I was grounded from the telephone pole on the corner here to my grandmother's house for a month, and just on this side of the street, mind you. So you always knew that you would be safe if you were in trouble. You could go to another railroader's house, another family, and help each other, and the wives tried to help each other as well, because it was tough working on the railroad. Dad, although Mom says he never complained about his job in 35 years, except when he had to miss Christmas, which was difficult, and Christmas never started until Dad got home. For the men, it was very lonely. They were away from their wives. Some men, they would come home and they'd hardly recognize their children because they didn't know who they were. They missed a lot of that formative thing, so it was hard on them. Dad always said, "You're not to date a railroader or marry one, and my brother's not to be one because it's too hard on the family, even with all the good things." For the wives, sometimes I feel, being a former history teacher, and you're doing research on soldiers away at war and things like that, and you check into their lives, the forgotten ones are the wives. The women were at home, in the case of railroaders, raising 4 kids on their own, and there was a period of over 8.5 years when my dad was working in the yards in Montreal, where he came home once a week. I saw my dad a day and a half in an 8.5-year period, a day and a half a week. Can you imagine what that's like? You were a single mom, really. You had to do everything. And as I get older and talk to other people, I realize that this created a lot of families that had problems. A lot of the women couldn't take it or suffered from nervous conditions. Some went to addictions. And the kids, of course, would suffer, and the husbands would suffer, and the wives, bless their hearts, I still don't know how they did it. So you would band together. Every Saturday, for as long as I can remember, myself and everybody on the street went to the Soper Theater downtown. It didn't matter what was showing, but all those kids were gone. That was family time, I guess. Now I understand a little bit. I said to somebody, "I saw Peyton Place at age 10 years old. What's that all about?" The theater was just a hub for all these railroader kids, and there were 100 of us running the aisles, and they had ushers and matrons who would follow you and make sure that you were being good. But you daren't come home until the show was over. And for 25 cents, it was cheaper than a babysitter, because for a quarter you could get 2 shows, cartoons, popcorn, and a pop. For 25 cents, cheaper than a babysitter. So there we be. Now, what else did we do for fun? Like I said, I don't remember having a lot of money. So we had the dreadful Sunday drive. Does anybody remember the Sunday drive? Lord, a lot of the wives didn't drive. This was a sort of a gender thing. So when Dad was home, we had to have the Sunday drive. I used to get car sick. So, and where would you go on a Sunday? Well, back in the day, no stores open. Maybe a gas station here and there is open. If you were very good at the end of the trip, they'd give you an ice cream cone. You were too bloody sick to eat it. Where would you go. You go and visit relatives you didn't know, didn't care about. You had to be dressed up. I mean, this was dressed up for us. You had to be dressed up because on Sundays, you weren't allowed to play games. You weren't allowed to play cards. You weren't allowed to do anything except go to church and visit relatives. And here is our picnic in the graveyard. We always, you can see some of the tombstones over here. We'd go and visit relatives, living or dead, didn't matter. So this is like a family joke, this picture. I haven't framed it, it sits on my mantle, but this is what we did. And it was a time when you also reverenced your departed. You would go for decoration Sundays or whatever and visit the graves and provide flowers. But this was the Sunday picnic. What else do you do that doesn't cost a lot of money? Well, my dad was a great outdoorsman. He'd been raised on a farm, but he loved to fish and hunt. When I was going through the albums, I said, we have more pictures of Dad hanging fish than I have ever seen. This is the youngest, winter, ice fishing. We had an ice fishing shack that would go out on the lake. And it was being with Dad. That's what it's all about. Now, Dad would take us also, it was the old 56 Chev. He would take us up to Devil Lake towards Kingston to fish for whitefish and trout. And if we caught anything, that was food on the table. That was not mounted on the wall. That was dinner. Same with hunting in the fall, when they go deer hunting. If he caught something, we ate better. So we'd go winter ice fishing. Dad would drive that 56 Chev out onto Devil Lake, and I could hear the ice cracking. And I remember one time I went with my brother, and it was time to be with Dad, and what you're going to do, you're going to go ice fishing. I figured, we're dead. We're going down. But I went because it was time to be with my dad. It was family love. You can see he started as very young. The old bamboo poles, light bulbs for floats, and that's probably out near Kilmarnock Bridge off the side, where you could fish. And that was a great day when you got to do that. Next one. What else would you do? Well, you played board games, deck of cards. It was a family tradition. Every time I got sick, they taught me another game of cards. I got to be pretty good. And Dad, bless his heart, if he was home when I had the mumps, he played cards with me wearing a mask and rubber gloves. But it didn't help, he got them anyway. And where did we get all the germs? Well, going to the show every Saturday. I mean, that's where we picked up the germs. We had every disease known to man. But you play cards. I even dug up an old Remoli with the poker hands written on the side. This was before you had Texas Hold'em. And we got pretty good at it for little kids, but that's what you do. Board games. When we were away, when Dad was away, Mom had a bingo game. She would buy prizes for us, 5-cent bag of chips or whatever, and we as a family would play games together. Every Christmas, it was a tradition. Somebody had to get a game, and that's what we did for the rest of the day. Kids in the back playing games. We still talk about it, even now. What else could you do? Well, the area I lived in at that time, over on Kent Street, so on this photo it doesn't even show up. I can remember I talked to one of the people in the group about discrimination and being treated differently when you were a child. Smiths Falls was not a classless society when I was growing up. I was called a railroader brat. Nothing but a railroader brat. You live on the wrong side of the tracks, which I found very confusing because where I lived, I had tracks on 3 sides. Which side of the tracks is the right side? I don't know. But I can see in this photo, maybe we did live on the wrong side of the tracks because we didn't even make the cut. We're over here. We're over here. So what do as a kid? You can't play on the street, right? Because you gotta be quiet. And there were a ton of us. So where do you go? What do? Railroad is adventure. Adventure. It was a stone's throw from there to tracks that were over here that I would cross to go to school. Wasn't supposed to. But I did cross to go to the store. But we did it anyway. So we would patrol the tracks. Walk up and down the track, seeing how many ties you could land on. How long can you go walking on a tie? If you catch grasshoppers and set them down there and get them squished and see what happens when the train goes by. But in that neighborhood, there wasn't even any good dirt. It was all cinder. So you couldn't play in the dirt. But right on the corner of Kent, or of Sussex, and what's that one that goes behind? Is that running?
Yeah.
There was what we called the oil field. So it was just a little corner lot where the oil trucks filled up. But they had great dirt. So we would climb the fence, get into the oil field, play in the dirt. Now we weren't supposed to do that, but we thought, oh, they'll never know. They'll never know. Excuse me, you're sitting in dirt that's drenched with diesel oil. When you come home, she knew. Other things we weren't supposed to do was go to the stockyards. The stock pens, the animal pens were over here. And every Saturday of my childhood, the trains would come through and unload horses and cows and sheep. And so we would all go and hang on the fence and dream that a horse would escape. And if a horse escaped and you were able to catch it, it was going to be yours. So many good dreams at the stockyards. But also, as with the railroad, there's good and bad. It's always a reality check. I remember one Saturday, there was a beautiful white horse that had the dry heaves, which are like hiccups, and that horse died. And there goes your dreams, right there. But we hoped. Also, there were coal bins, as big as, well, the back behind. It easily filled this room, and a lot of the homes where I lived were heated by coal, so they'd be delivered to the house, but there were also massive bins. It was like climbing on your own mountain. It's a wonder we didn't get killed. But we played in there. Again, you're not supposed to do it, but you come home black, your mother knows where you've been. The roundhouse at the far end. This doesn't show it that well, but one side was all windows. And my one sister was telling me, as late as even yesterday, tell them about the roundhouse. Because when I was a kid with all the glass windows, it was like a fairy palace. She was just in awe. And a lot of what we felt about our dad's job was awe. And what are we going to do? If I could flip back one. Of course, everybody back then had a bicycle. And you rode your bicycle all over town, once you had permission, of course. But there was a side street down William Street, again, it's sort of off the side here, that had a branch line that went from the CPR lines down William Street to the old Frosting Wood. Now we called it the bike eater track, because the tracks go right down the center of the road. And you could tell who lived in that neighborhood because we had skinned elbows, skinned knees, and the baskets on our bicycles were bent like that because the tires would just fall in the tracks and just throw you. But it was good training because later in life when I had a motorcycle, I knew how to cross the tracks without getting thrown. Okay, next one. Another thing, now this is much after my parents' retirement, that's my dad and mom at the end. Another thing that railroaders did was they'd get together for house parties, playing musical instruments. My dad, violin, my mom played the piano. And I remember all my childhood, Dad was practicing the violin. It's like killing a cat. But once he retired, he had time to actually practice, and he became an excellent fiddler. And I said, Dad, I just left home too soon. So they would get together, they'd play guitar, sing songs at individuals' houses. And that was one part of their fun and entertainment. As I also was mentioning, the difficulties that the wives would have being left at home and the illnesses that they could develop. My mom went through a period where, with her nerves, she could not leave the house. I guess nowadays they call it agoraphobia. So she would order things to come to the house. At that time, there was no Loblaws or independent grocers, but there were an awful lot of corner stores. And they would deliver right to your house. You could phone in the list, they'd deliver it to you. And because of the community you lived in, they knew where your dad worked, so they'd let you run the tab. And that would be paid on payday for the railroaders. So, long story short, one time Mother decided, you saw that old battery gray couch that we were all sitting on back in the day. She decided it needed to be revamped. She was going to buy some material to cover it. And she had some skill sewing. So she ordered, and it was, don't tell her I said so, but it was like a god-awful turquoise color. And it was like almost denim or canvas. She ordered the wrong amount. And she, for some reason, maybe it was on sale, she couldn't send it back. Well, they didn't want it either. So she began. And people would say to me, where do you live, little girl? And I'd say, well, I'm easy to spot because you see the color of my jumper and my coat. I match the drapes. I match the couch. I match the chair. And you see all those ones in terrible turquoise? Those are my siblings over there. So that was a great family joke too, but making ends meet was important. What do we have next? I think, oh, okay. But you were also afraid. This was an accident that my dad was involved in. And it was a 37-car pileup. And he was an engineer on the train. I was away at university by then. But even to this day, I am aware whenever there's a train accident anywhere in the world. It strikes me. I pay attention to it. No one was hurt. Can you imagine? No one was hurt in this one. Not like the story that we'll hear later. It didn't have a happy ending like that. But this was part of the problem. Dad worked, as I said, for 8.5 years in Montreal. And Mother, you talk about love. All the time for the 35 years he was on the railroad, she never missed packing a pail. This was the pail that Dad would take when he went to Montreal for a week. Mother would pack it for him. Different than a regular pail that if you were just going to be working a 12-hour shift or a 24-hour shift. And the men, again, if they ran out of food, if one ran out of food, they would share with someone else. They would stay at something called the bunkhouse down in Montreal, and they would spend maybe $5 a week on condiments for salt, pepper, things like that. But for a week, my dad would take, in that pail, a glass jar of milk, because remember, there's no milk containers. And there's no fast food places either. A pound of butter, a pound of bacon, 6 eggs, 2 pieces of homemade pie, maybe 6 homemade cookies, a steak, I don't know what day he had that, but that was extra special. A can of soup, crackers, a loaf of bread, sugar, tea, coffee, and a couple of sandwiches. And then the railroaders down there would pool their money and go for a taxi to get groceries. So that's what they would live on. And at home, the wife and the kids are trying desperately to make ends meet, eating what they could afford, and working together. And the kids grew up fast. We had, I'll never forget, we had responsibility very early in life, and all of us had jobs to do in the house and out of the house. I had my first out-of-the-house job when I was 10 years old. And by 12, I was buying all my clothes, and continued so. So that was what we did, and we had jobs. And one of the important things, you didn't miss a call on the railroad. The engineer or fireman or whatever would get the call that I talked about. They had 2 hours to get to work once they accepted the call. If you missed the call, you went to the bottom of the list. You probably missed pay, might get some demerit points. One time, my sister was at home after having foot surgery on both feet, wrapped up. She answered the phone. She was 10, 11 years old. Nobody was home. We were at school. Dad was out helping another railroader put a roof on a house 5 miles out of town. She was terrified. What do I do? That kid got on a bicycle with 2 bandaged toes, drove 5 miles to make sure my dad didn't miss school. That was love too. That was family. They tell me I'm running out of time and I got a ton of things to say. But I'll talk about something I call the commandments of railroader children. Thou shalt not miss a call. Your family comes first. And our siblings and myself are still very, very close. Be responsible, honest, and reliable, because you've got a job. Thou shalt not make noise when other railroaders are sleeping. Meal times are 8, 12, and 5, even to this very day, because that's railroad time. And we would know because we'd hear the trains come. Be home by the noon train, be home by the 5 o'clock train. Thou shalt not play on the tracks, in the cinders, in the stockyard pens, at the freight yards, in the coal bins, at the roundhouse, the oil fields, climb on the big bulletin board that was on the corner of Kent and Sussex, or climb on the roofs that you can get onto there. And last one, which is one of my own, thou shalt not get caught doing anything. Okay, I'll quickly flip through the rest of the slides. This was a royal train from 1939. Railway connection. When I went to university and Dad, bless his heart, I was going to St. Catharines and I'd never been there. We got a pass on the train, not this train, but on a regular passenger train, and Dad took me on the train to St. Catharines to install me there. When I got there, my roommate, who came from the Brampton area, her grandfather was a railroader. So she gave this picture of the royal train from 1939 to my dad. So a connection already. Next. Dad was very proud that he got to drive the Royal Hudson, which was another royal train, which also is in the picture, on its final trip from Montreal out west, and he drove it from there to Smiths Falls. Very proud. Next. Family connections. These are grandchildren. One of the things that Dad could do for us and did do, we all became very familiar with trains. You'd get to ride the yard engine. I even knew how to drive the yard engine. Knew all about the dead man brake and the speeds you had to have and the red blocks and green blocks. So any of our friends that came, or relatives, even up to his grandchildren, got to go on the yard engine. This was the centennial celebration for CPR, and there's 3 various generations. This gentleman here, my uncle, he was the son of the man that was killed on the railroad way back then when I started. He actually worked on the railroad for about 6 months after he was in the Air Force in World War I, but he went into forestry instead, probably the hangover of the tragedy. So we've got 3 generations all brought together, celebrating the railroad and our connections with the railroad. The open house when my dad retired, that was a big gala, commemorated by his most prized possession here. Getting together, another house party. Funny thing there's a picture of us all together, all the kids and everything standing in the living room. And again, it brings home the idea of absenteeism. My brother couldn't make it, so all of us are laying up on the banister in the house for this big retirement picture. And we took a cousin who was about the same size as my brother and put a bag over his head with drag right on it. So we could have the family photo. Next, please. This is taken 28 years after the man retired. He's still fascinated with the railway. Okay, last one. This is me. I'm sitting on top of the locomotive at the Railway Museum many years ago when I was teaching. And man, I don't know who was in charge of the Railway Museum back then, but did I ever get in trouble for that? But to me, this was important. I did this so that I could have a Christmas gift for my dad. Because being a child of the railroad, a railroad brat, it was good and bad and love. But it was a great ride. So that was something to him. Thank you. Yes, question?
Well, I noticed there in the retirement party, you had 1,600 to 1,800 rather than 2 to 4. That'd be a railway.
Good, I hadn't even noticed that. It had to be the railroad connection. Good eyes. Any other questions, comments?
How many of your early boyfriends were railway deep?
For me, none. Not allowed. Not allowed. I know that my sisters went on with railroaders, but I think that there just weren't a whole lot of boys of my particular age that I hadn't already known and grown up with and played with and all the rest, so they weren't in the romantic market. They were more like extended brothers or friends. So that I wasn't dating them, I was just hanging out with them. Always knew I could go to them if I had a problem.
So we will continue. I am so pleased to be able to introduce Kay Leeson, who will be telling her story of love and arriving by railway to start her family and her life here in Smith Falls, all the way from England. And Kay, again, I also met with the History Project, and she was gracious enough to agree to be interviewed by some grade 7 and 8 students through Chimo Elementary, and videotape coming soon, I promise. But Kay is, I mean, she's just been wonderful, and we're so pleased that you were able to come with us today. And she's sort of, I mean, just so generous, and in a way I sort of think of you as a, you know, a sort of adopted grandmother, and she has 6 children, so, you know, it's a few more, really. But anyway, and I'd also like to introduce Hetty Soror, who is a journalist, and she will be sort of leading the conversation with Kay, and this is a wonderful, wonderful story, and we're so pleased to be able to share it with you, so thank you.
First of all, we'll start out with Kay. I met Kay through Anne, and I actually sat down and interviewed her. The idea was to write a short little blurb about what was going to be happening here today. But I started talking to Kay, and I started hearing about her story, and I couldn't stop asking more and more questions because it's such a fascinating story. We found we had a lot in common. We're both immigrants. Yeah. But what was fascinating about Kay's story was when she came to Canada, she had no idea where she was going or how she was going to get there. She just showed up.
That's true.
So, Kay, start us from the very, very beginning. You were a young woman in England.
Yes.
And
the war was over.
And the war was over. How did you meet?
Well, I was staying at a friend's in Boston, and she had 2 beautiful dogs, which needed to be taken for a walk each day, pretty well, because they were quite large. And the grounds that they had in the apartment weren't suitable for a dog, really. But they had it, so they had to have a walk. So I offered to do that. And I started out on the main road, but my friend had said to me, now whatever you do, don't go towards the top of the cliffs, because if you do, the dogs are going to be very, very happy to go down into the ocean, and they'll take you with them, and there's steps going down the cliffs, which I don't think you'd be able to manage with 2 dogs pulling you. And I said, well, no, I'd be careful. So we proceeded on our walk, and we went quite a distance, and I thought, well, I'd better turn towards the cliff and turn around and come back through on a side street. So which I did. And I turned up this one side road. Do I have to almost eat it?
Like it's an ice cream cone.
Pretty much.
Can't hear you.
Sorry.
Can't hear you.
There you go.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's good.
Oh, there it is.
But anyway, we turned on this side street, and as I turned, with the dogs, of course, they were anxious to get going, And there were 4 servicemen walking ahead of us. And of course, they're jostling each other as they're going along. They probably had a few drinks because it was supper time. And they were heading back, I guess, to their own base. And I thought, oh dear, here we go, because we had become quite used to the soldiers whistling as we went by, or hooting, you know, and saying, oh, go, you know, etc. And so I expected the same type of thing. But anyway, we proceeded ahead, and I thought, well, I'll just go around them because they were straddling the whole road. So they'd taken them all around. But anyway, we proceeded to go by. And as I was going by, one boy, I don't know who, said, watch out for those wolves beside us. And of course, I'm thinking, well, smart Alex, real smart things to do. I'm going to say something back, so I said, they're not half as bad as the wolves beside me. They, of course, thought that was something, I guess, but they hoo-hoo-haws and whatever. And I proceeded on, but all of a sudden I felt someone beside me, well, coming up behind me, and gradually coming up beside me. And I thought, looking at him, and I thought, what, did you want something? And he said, no, I just thought I'd help you with the dogs. And I said, actually, I don't need any help, thank you. So anyway, we proceeded on, and he continued to come with me. And we had to go through a park area and to get out onto the main area that we started on. So going through the park, there was benches, of course. So he said, wouldn't you like to sit down? We'd have a chat. I said, oh, right, I don't care to sit down. I have to get the dogs back. He said, all right. So I said, that's it. I thought, well, now he won't bother me anymore. I'll go ahead. So I started on ahead with the dogs because, of course, we had slowed down. And I went ahead, and he's still beside me. And I said, where are you going? I said, I thought maybe I'd see you home. And I said, did you? That's nice. So that was fine. He came with me, stayed right beside me, discovered where I lived, and of course made all kinds of inquiries after I'd gone inside. Because he said, wouldn't you like to go to the show tonight or something like that? I said, no, thank you. And I'm busy. So that was fine. I got away with that. And somehow, he was very ambitious, that man, really. He discovered that my friend had a telephone. Now, they didn't have a lot of telephones in England. They had a telephone booth, which if you wanted to use it, you had to go up the road. No. But he found out that she had one because the business people that he did. So he kept phoning. He phoned, and I told her to tell him that I was busy. And that was fine. 1, 2, 3. The third time my friend said to me, she said, no.
Is this an interference?
Is it a what?
We'll get him closer.
Okay.
Oh, there we go.
I hate it. But anyway, he found out about the telephone, and he kept phoning. But she said, well, the third time that was enough. She said, you're going to go and flirt yourself. So I said, well, all right. So he phoned again, and wanted to go to see if I wanted to go to the show. I said, but that was fine, I'd go. So we went to the show.
Now, how long did this all last for you? He was courting you for how long?
Well, that would be a couple of weeks anyway.
A couple of weeks. And then, at the
And
end
then
of
I
that,
gave in.
at the end of that time, like, how much time did you actually spend together in England?
Of the total time?
Mm-hmm.
Well, from August until December.
And then he left in December?
No,
Okay.
we were married in December.
Oh, okay.
And then he came and he would stay most of the time with me in my home, at my home.
Now, where was home?
And that was out in the country, considered out in the country,
And close to
Bournemouth.
Bournemouth.
It would be about 6.5 miles, roughly.
Okay.
I've never measured it, but I'd say roughly 6.5 miles. But anyway, we'd be out at my home, which was a small holding, and a small holding in England was a small farm. We had 2 pigs, a cow, chickens, and a beautiful garden, and so he was quite at home with that,
What was his name?
Lyle.
Okay.
But in the service, he was called Lee,
Oh, okay.
because the boys, they used the surnames more, apparently.
Oh, right.
When they called each other,
Yeah.
they would use the service names. So he was called Lee, so we of course called him Lee also,
Oh,
not Lyle. I had to get used to that when I came to Canada too, because everybody called him Lyle. So it was
confusing.
confusing at times. Anyway, we stayed together in England until he was slated to go home, which was in May.
Okay.
And he left then in May to go back to Canada. And I would have to wait then until I heard from the government to see when I'd be able to follow him,
Okay.
which I did.
And how long was it? How long did you wait?
Actually, the papers came for me to leave just after my 20th birthday
Which would have been
in August.
in
The
August.
following August.
And you left in.
And then I left just in later of August.
Okay. Now, where did you leave from, and how did you get from the UK to Canada?
Well, I had to go by train there
Okay. From
And-
Bournemouth to London.
to go to London. Went to London, we stayed overnight there, and we were given all types of information and papers, etc. And then we were on the train in the morning back to Southampton,
Oh my gosh, yes.
where, not knowing what ship we were coming on, I was slated to go on the Queen Mary, which was wonderful, which to me at the time it didn't mean a thing. I was just going to meet Lyle, and that was the main thing. I was on my way. And so we got on the boat, and there were hundreds of us. There was hundreds already on there,
Of war brides.
of war brides from Holland.
From Holland.
Yes.
Okay. And Britain, or just?
Well, then,
Mostly.
then we were getting on too, so there would be
Oh,
included too.
Okay.
There may have been some German war brides there, I'm not sure.
Okay. So you all came over. Where did you land in England?
Then,
I mean, in Canada.
We had 6 days on the water, and I also traveled with Mackenzie King.
Oh wow.
He was on the whole ship,
Oh cool.
but he was on the top of the ship, and no one was allowed to get near him. But anyway, we did travel to Halifax. Now, I'm not sure of the time when we landed in Halifax, because it took a certain amount of time to get all the babies together and all the girls sorted out and which area they were going, north, south, east, west, whatever. And but eventually we were put on the train that came to our area in the late night.
Did you know where your area was?
I hadn't a clue. I had asked people on the boat. It's amazing. We all went around and said, "Where are you going? What's the name of the place that you're going?" And none of us knew where we were going actually. And then what amazed us most when we did get on the train, which was lovely, it was the first time I met a black porter.
Right, yes.
And I had heard of them, you know, on a movie or whatever. I thought, what a gentleman. He was such a nice person. And he handed out in my hand to get onto the train. I thought that was lovely. And anyway, on that train, you had your bunks or your berths that you had to sleep in.
Did you share?
We all were in one sort of cabin, but with berths in a row.
How many of you were there on the train?
Oh heavens, I have no idea.
Okay.
There were quite a few. I mean, the train was full.
Okay.
So, how many cars there were?
So a couple hundred war rides?
Probably, or more. It depended on what area they were going. And
So-
I presume that we go to Toronto.
So how long did it take you to get from Halifax to Smiths Falls?
But it took 2 days.
Okay.
So in the meantime, we're stopping and going and stopping and going. And each time we're all dashing to the window to see where it is and what it is and what the expanse of the countryside was just humongous. Because how could a country be so big? And there was so much. It was just beautiful. But on each place that we stopped, there'd be a village or a town, and we'd look to see how many girls were getting off, and if they were nervous, and if they had a husband to meet them. And most cases they did.
Now this was important. What
Yes,
was?
it was.
Okay, so what happened if you didn't have somebody to meet you at the station?
Oh, that was drastic. Really was.
So
Because what are you going to do?
Well-
Because if you had no one there,
yeah.
you're left on a limb.
Now, could you, if you didn't have anybody to meet you, could you just go into the town and find your own way, or?
You're pretty brave if you did.
Okay.
No, as far as I could understand from the girl that looked after us, she said if you were not accepted as such,
As in not met.
that's right, if you weren't met, then you would have to be taken ahead to Toronto, to the Red Cross services there. And if there was no one that got in touch with them, then you would return to England,
Wow, okay.
which was a little sad,
Yeah,
very sad.
it would be.
It would. But anyway,
So you eventually arrived in Smiths Falls
I
in the
did.
middle of the night.
The middle of the night. Now, when I arrived there, there was, I believe there was 3 other girls that got off at the same time as I did. And they each had their husbands. And it was wonderful to see them. I helped one girl, and I got off too, expecting to see my husband too. Nobody there.
Uh-oh.
Everybody was gone.
So what happened? What had happened to him?
Well, that's what I was worried about. after swinging around, swinging me around in the
Well,
circle.
go back just a sec, because when he arrived, you didn't immediately recognize him,
I
did
haven't
you?
a clue. No, all I saw was a tall street coming around the corner in a suit. That wasn't a uniform.
And the lady who was waiting with you asked you if that was your husband.
Yes, she did.
And what did you say?
I said, no, I don't know. I really didn't know.
Now, how is it you didn't know though?
Well, she didn't have a uniform on. And it was dark. It was very dark.
Okay,
And the lights were very dim.
yeah.
And the men were all resting, I think. The men that worked on the railway. But at that moment, they were having a
Okay.
coffee break or whatever. And it was cool. It was quite cool. But anyway, he did. And I stood there with no one except the red dress lady. And she said, now, do you think he's forgotten? I said, I don't know. And she said, well, do you know where he lives? And I said, yes, he lives with his sister. Well, who's his sister? And I said, Mrs. Coleman. Oh, all right. Do you know where she lives? I said, well, in Smith's Falls. Anyway, she said, well, I'll see what I can do. So she went into this little building where these railroad men were. And as I said, they were all in there, and they had their dark overalls on, and they had their hats. Like Maureen was telling us previously, they wore those hats.
Yeah.
And it looked gloomy to me, but anyway, poor men, they'd been out there working hard. But anyway, she went in there and there was a telephone. So she got onto the telephone. And she said, well, I think it'll be all right when she came out. And I said, oh, that's good. And I wasn't sure. But anyway,
He did show up.
after a while I heard this awful noise. If you heard a train coming in, it sounded like it. This car came up and I mean, after all, it was night time and the sidewalks were roared up and everybody had gone to bed. So it was really noisy. And then I heard everything stopped and this tall street came around the corner and grabbed me and took me around in circles. And so I presume nobody else began tonight. Really. But anyway, he did keep me, but I did find out where he'd been.
Oh,
I
where?
did.
Where?
He'd been out dancing.
Without you?
Without me. He'd been out with his brother.
And what, forgot?
And his wife had forgotten time. No, not really. He
No.
was told I was to come in at 2:30. Instead of that, I came in at 1:30.
Oh, so he's to be forgiven.
Really, I had to forgive him.
Now, you arrived here, you didn't know anybody in Smiths Falls.
No, I must say, Lyle had a wonderful sister and brother-in-law that accepted me as if I was part of them. And they hugged me and made me feel like a person. And I really felt as if I was home again. And they accepted me into their home and taught me many things. And Lyle took me around to introduce me to all his brothers and sisters, which I didn't have a clue how to remember. Because he had 7 brothers and 3 sisters.
Good Lord.
Wow. We had Sterling, we had Alfie, we had Garnet, we had, and I thought, how am I ever going to remember this?
Well, there was one thing that after you got here, you wanted to get a house, and at that time Lyle was working on the railroad, was he?
No.
No, he wasn't working on the railroad?
No, at that time he was still working with the carpenter work with his brother.
Okay, but you guys wanted to get a house of your own,
Oh, yes.
but there was a hiccup.
There certainly was. There was a gentleman in town that looked after this type of thing. And he had an office, a very small office above a feed store. And he was very nice. It's just that he couldn't be too generous, I'm afraid. But anyway, he informed me that you couldn't put your name in for a house, a wartime house, until you had a child. And I said, oh. Well, I said, it doesn't matter that I'm pregnant. And she said, no, that doesn't. You have to have a baby. You have to have the child. No. So that was fine. Time went on. Of course, 9 months later, I had my child. I had a son, Alan. And as soon as I had Alan and I was able, I went down to see this gentleman again. And I trotted upstairs with my baby in my arms. And I said, Mr. So-and-so, I have my baby, can I have a house? And he said, well, we'll put your name in now. I said, thank you. But I had to wait.
How long did you wait?
We waited until, what? Alan was 9 months old.
Wow. That's pretty good.
Because you had to have your name in. That's all there was to it.
Wow. What do you miss the most? What do you wish, when you look back now, what was it that,
I missed.
yeah.
I don't know that I missed a lot, really, because I had so much here. And once I had my own family,
How many children did you have?
I had 6. 6 beautiful children. My gorgeous creatures, I call them.
Wow.
And they're wonderful to me. But I do miss, in a way, things that I could have done more for my own mother. And it wasn't until she came to visit a few times that she would speak of, now at my age, she would speak of how she was quite lonely, even though she had family around her. She was quite lonely because she'd lost her friends of her own age group. And at the time when she told me, I wasn't understanding enough to feel how she felt. And I only wish I'd been able to. I do feel sorry about that. I don't, like, it's not a type of missy thing, but it's something that I did feel sorry about not being able to understand, and now I can.
Thank you, Kay.
So very well.
Thank you for the wonderful, wonderful story.
A quick note, when I was interviewing Kay for the history project, one of the questions, and this just sort of goes to show you the difference in generations, I said to Kay, I said, well, you know, what did you think about just leaving your family and coming to a completely different country and to this man you don't know all that well and everything? And she just says, well, I never even thought about it. So I don't know if I could do that, but thank you so much for coming and sharing your story with everyone. And I mean, oh, there's so many good stories. We'll get you next time too. All right, and finally, I'd like to introduce our here. Donna Stewart is with the Ottawa Storytellers. I asked Donna if she could let me know how long she's been telling stories, and she said 70 years plus. So, which is hard to believe because you're only 60. So.
No, not 20 years ago.
But Donna's been with the Ottawa Storytellers for 23 years, and I actually first, we actually didn't meet, but I first saw Donna, I guess it was about a year ago last fall. She and the Workers' Heritage Museum, Workers' History Museum, put on a lovely presentation about the Almont train wreck. And so we've always sort of follow each other on Facebook, and we do keep in touch. So I'm especially pleased you're able to share a lovely story with us today. Thank you.
Thank you.
This story takes place in 1942. 1942 was different. The world was different. And Canada was at war. And a great many of the people in Canada were very busy working hard for the war effort. Mac Colzer was in Toronto working for the war effort. He was building bombers. As fast as they got them built, they shipped them over to England. Averill decided, that was the company that was in charge of the building, decided that Christmas to close down at noon on Christmas Eve. So everybody would have Thursday afternoon, Friday was Christmas, and then the weekend. They'd have a good long weekend. And Max was going home to Renfrew, home to the Ottawa Valley. And he was ready. His suitcase was packed. He took it to work and shoved it into his locker. As soon as the bell went at noon, out he went, straight to the train station. He was there, one of the first, and one of the first on the train. He found himself a seat, and he took off his coat, hat, and gloves, and folded everything out neatly, and was going to sit down when he noticed some packages were trying to get up the steps. And they kept banging the wall, and they just didn't seem to know how to get up. He went over and said, "Excuse me, can I help?" And a voice said, "Oh, please." And so he took the packages, and behind the packages was a very nice-looking lady, a cute blonde. He took the packages, and then he later helped her with her suitcase. And when she was stowed on the train, she looked around. It was pretty filled by then. He said, "Would you like to join me and sit next to me?" "Oh, yes," she said. And so she did. And they started talking. And by the time the train left that station, they were deep into conversation. They talked about where they were going, home for Christmas, what they were doing in Toronto, the war effort. Oh, but they could hardly wait for the war to be over so they could go home. She to a little place just out of Perth, and he to Renfrew. Small towns were better. And they talked about where they lived, and on it went. And before they even knew it, the conductor was calling Smith Falls. Smith Falls was where she'd get off and get on the train to Perth. He didn't want her to go. Then he had the idea. They were coming home, both of them, Sunday night. And he'd be on the train first. He'd be on the train before her, and when the train got in, he'd have a seat for her, and would that be all right with her? "Oh, yes," she said, "I'd like that." And as she got off, he called goodbye. "See you soon." She says, "Yes, we have a date." And he was so pleased. He was whistling most of the way. He got to Renfrew, And Christmas was good. Christmas was always good in Vancouver. But that year there seemed to be more people come home, and everything was more exciting, and a lot of people felt maybe they'd never be home again. Finally, it was Sunday night. Time to go. It seemed like it just started. He packed his bag, went down to the train station. The train was late. It was very late. Now, normally he'd be very pleased if the train was late, but he had a date in Smith Falls. Finally it came, and down the track it went. Finally it got to on prayer. And he heard the conductor yelling at people to hurry up and get aboard. Then the conductor was ready to pull the switch to warn the engineer to take off. He didn't even get it finished pulled when there was a big thud and the train moved a few inches and then stopped. And all was quiet. But he looked out, and on the platform he could see something had happened. The people there looked stunned, and then everybody was moving. He slipped his coat on and went out. He had to get right off the train before he could see what happened. He was in the car right behind the engine. That's where the people going to Toronto were supposed to sit. But when he looked back, there was that sleek engine sitting in the middle of the third car from the back, right in the middle. Big light shining. And the two cars behind it, the tops had split, and people had come flying out, and then he heard the cries and the moans, and he went forward to see if he could help. On that night, he helped move baggage and pieces of the train. He helped people get free. Some people were trapped for 2 and 3 hours. He helped carry stretchers, and the stretchers were anything they could get. Some boys had taken the doors off the city hall and brought them across. They made perfect stretchers, light, wide enough. And sometimes when he carried a stretcher, they put it in the bottom floor of the city hall. With the doors off, it was cold in there, and they were using it for a morgue. Finally, things settled down, and he went to one of the places where they were serving coffee. And as he sat there and drank his coffee, he could hear the voices around him. They say more than 30 dead. A hospital train is coming soon. They're going to take the badly hurt into Ottawa. Eventually, that hospital train came. 80 seriously wounded were put aboard, and 20 walking wounded. When it took off, it was a few hours later when another train came to take the able-bodied passengers. He rode that. He finally got to Toronto, but it was too late to go to work. He was almost finished the shift. But there was a certain somebody he wanted to explain to. He didn't want her to think he'd stood her up. He remembered how she described where she lived, the end of the Jarvis line. He got on the Jarvis streetcar, went to the end of the line, and followed what he remembered of her directions. He found her house, her name on the mailbox, and he went in and knocked on the apartment door. The door opened and a young woman said, "Yes, I would like to speak to Miss Pennant, if she's home." The girl looked at him and said, "She's home, but she's not taking callers. She doesn't want to talk to anybody tonight." "Oh, I'm sorry. Is she not feeling well? No, she just feels very bad. Oh, well, just tell her Mac Kozer dropped by, and I'll get in touch with her later. Mac Kozer? Mac? The girl suddenly started calling for her sister, pulled him inside and said, but you're dead, you're dead. You were killed in the train wreck. It took a while to explain. By that time, the lovely Miss Pennant had joined them. He went out a few times later with her. Then he started going steady. And within a year, they were married. They stayed in Toronto and worked for the war effort. But as soon as the war was over, they packed up and moved back to Renfrew. They had a lovely life in Renfrew, sorry. He became eventually in charge of the post office there. And they raised half a dozen children. And life was good to the very end. Thank you.
So that does sort of end this afternoon. I want to thank everybody very much for coming out. Thankfully, the snowstorm hasn't hit us, and hopefully won't. So do drive safely on your way home. Thank you for coming out. Thank you very much to our speakers, starting with Maureen. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Kay, and to Hetty, and thank you, Donna, for coming all the way from Ottawa. And also, I wanted to thank Annie from Parks Canada and to Parks Canada for allowing us to use this lovely space. We'll probably be doing, I think, maybe more of our stories from the railway here. And once again, thank you to Barry and the Workers' History Museum. And finally, before I let you guys go, I just want to acknowledge Leah McRoberts, who's our program and outreach coordinator, and she was instrumental in getting this day put together and arranged. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you for sticking with us through our technical difficulties. All right, enjoy your day.